3, 2, 1.
Hello Blender friends, and welcome to another one of these. I hope you're all well, and I'm sorry this has taken so long. I've been pretty busy with my other channel as well as keeping a roof over my head. You know how that is. This is actually from the intro sequence of my other channel. I just didn't use this shot, and I thought it would be perfect for what I'm showing you guys today. This just starts with a simple camera track done in Blender, and it ends with a snapshot taken of the last frame in the background plate. So the whole thing is married together with some animated film grain and a color grade. I actually didn't do those two things separately. I used the Film Convert plugin from within DaVinci Resolve. This is the Fuji Eterna preset with a little bit of adjustment to the exposure. This could have of course been all done in the Blender Compositor with a bit of a grade and overlay. Film grain overlay should be animated because film grain moves in real life. The silver halide crystals that are suspended in a film's emulsion are what's photosensitive. They are actually the grain in the film. The larger those crystals are, the more photosensitive they are, or the quicker that they react to light. So faster films will have more grain in them. Black and white film normally has only one layer of these crystals, and color film has several of these layers, including some reactive dyes as well, of course, for the colors. My first photography teacher would be very proud that I remembered all that theory. Ziggy Mijukovsky, wherever you are, how about that? So I'm choosing to show you what I had to do outside Blender first. I normally will put together some sort of a rough storyboard and then a shot list of what I need before I go out. But as organized as I tried to be, I still ended up going out on 4 separate occasions to get everything I needed, trying to make certain that it was around the same time of the evening and the weather was similar. I wanted to make sure that my lighting was relatively realistic, so I brought along my 360 camera along with the camera that I was going to use to shoot the background plate or the background video. In this shot, of course, it starts somewhere around here and it goes around this corner. I used a Theta 360 camera to capture the HDRI. The Theta I use is the Theta S, which is pretty old. I bought it in like 2016 or 17, and it's only 14 megapixels, but you can buy them used for roughly $100 US, maybe up to 150 Canadian, I guess. Normally I'll try to keep myself out of these shots, which is a little bit difficult with the 360 camera. The app that I'm using to do the different exposures or the bracketed exposures is called Simple HDR, which is an app co-developed by a guy named Nick Campbell. For those of you who aren't familiar with Nick, he's a Cinema 4D guy and Cinema 4D instructor actually, and he's got a company called Grayscale Gorilla. The camera has its own built-in memory that the images are saved to, so when you get home you can use your image editor of choice to compile those images into an HDR. Some of you may notice I'm using Serif's Affinity Photo. Affinity Photo is far more advanced than something like GIMP and far less expensive than Photoshop. Been using Photoshop since version 2. I know I'm dating myself. But Affinity Photo is a one-time fee and you own the software, you're not renting it. And it is fantastic for things like this because it's got some awesome AI for removing things like ghosts when you're doing multiple exposures. Anything requiring AI is really good in Affinity Photo. Panoramics, for instance, or anything like that. It uses this engine to match everything up perfectly, and it does a great job with HDRIs. You'll basically go up into here and you'll find new HDR merge, and then you pick the images and it'll merge them into an HDR, and you can go ahead and adjust whatever you have to before saving it out. Okay, here we are in Blender. As you can see, the car is rigged here, and that is done with Car Rig Pro. got onto Car Rig Pro because of Ian Hubert. Watching one of his videos, he actually rigged some cars in a Ed Sheeran music video using Car Rig Pro, and I thought to myself, well, it's got to be worth something if Ian used it for that. It's not really an add-on, it's more just a rig that you import into the scene where you need it. It's just a matter of parenting the corresponding parts of Car Rig Pro to the parts of your car model. And Car Rig Pro gives you actually tons of flexibility as far as control over the way your car moves. I'm just using the basic rig, and then of course I'm combining that with the camera tracking that I did. These little letters here, A and I, are how you access the controls within the rig. You can see here in the properties we get all the controls we need to adjust where the wheels are and things like that. And then if you go into the A over here, that gives you the controls over actual movement of the car. So next, onto the movement of the camera. Here at the top you'll see I've got a motion tracking tab. If you don't have a motion tracking tab already set up there, you can do that by just hitting the plus, going down to VFX and choosing motion tracking, and that'll add a little tab up here for you. So when you jump into that with the camera selected, yeah, you'll see here that I've already got my tracks created. There are a lot of videos out there on camera tracking, and I'm going to do one as well. Until then, you can always refer to some of those videos for this part of it. Anyway, the gist of it is that you go into the tracker and load in your clips from here, and then you want to make sure that your blender frame rate is the same as your clips frame rate. In this information here on the right, you can see my clip is 23.98 frames per second, so you're going to want to make sure that your frame rate is the same in Blender. Actually, I used stabilized footage, so after I shot this I brought it into Resolve and stabilized it first. I'd recommend that you click on prefetch after you've loaded your clip in. It's going to make scrubbing a lot faster because it essentially just caches your clip for you. And what you want to make sure is that you have a very low solve error. So you can see here this is super clean. We don't have any erratic looking points, and you can see in the graph down here that's the same. Okay, let me just go over this for you real quick until I make that video just about tracking. For a simple shot, this will work, and I'm going to set the size of the frame that we're working in. So I shoot everything in UHD, which is 3840 by 2160, and the frame rate of our clip is 2393 FPS. And then I'm going to add that motion tracking tab up here by going VFX motion tracking. And then in here we don't really need these two top windows right now. I'm going to load in the clip from here. I've got my stabilized shot here. Open that up, let that load. Now I'm going to go into prefetch just to load that into the cache so I can scrub through it nice and quickly. First I want to detect the features. This is the easy way to do this. You can do this manually too, but in this case I'm just going to click on detect features. It gives me a bunch of little points that Blender is going to track, and then I'm going to go down here to track markers. That's going to track from where the playhead is now all the way forward. I'm just going to let that run. That did that pretty quickly. Now here you can see that it's actually pretty clean. From the graph you can see there are some stray ones that look like these stray hairs here. You can actually, I just clicked on refine markers here, but you can do that right on the graph editor. So I'm just clicking and hitting delete on these, and that'll clean those right up. And in this case, this is all I had to do for mine, and I was able to clean up that data pretty nicely. Of course, the project called for a recognizable driver, and there was no time to create one in CG. I knew that I would have to do some green screen work, and the most important thing is that you light your green screen evenly. I didn't do that great a job here, but it was more than good enough for the project. I knocked out the green screen using some of the new tools in Resolve. I could have just as easily done this with the compositor in Blender using some of the keying tools. So we've outputted a TIFF sequence with the alpha channels intact from our keyed footage. Now, how to get the driver into the car, you ask? It's pretty simple. It's another trick from Ian Hubert. Well, it's actually something I knew from before when I used to do architectural rendering. When we had to bring people into a shot, we typically bring them in on a plane, and that's exactly what we're going to do now. Blender has a free add-on. It's included with Blender. You just have to activate it. Many of you know this one. It is import images as planes. Once you've navigated to your frame, select the first one, hold shift, click on the last one. I've got them all selected now. I am clicking on animate image sequences and click on import images as planes. Now at first you won't see anything. That's because we're in the wrong view mode. You're going to have to click on one of these two. It's going to come up purple like the texture is missing. You just have to scrub through a little bit over here until you see the driver come up, and there you have it. But we're not quite done yet. We're going to have to actually go into the shading tab now. So first we're going to want to bring in some nodes here. I'm going to hit Shift A and look for an emission shader. There we go. That's one. We're going to want a mix shader as well. So mix. I'm going to actually add an invert as well. Like that. I'm going to spread these out. We actually don't need the principal BSDF. I can get rid of that. We're going to want the factor controlled by the alpha. So that's going to go in here. And let's just take the shader and put it in the surface. Actually, and we're going to want to flip the alpha, so that's why we've got the invert right here. The color is going to go into the emission because we don't want the color affected by the lighting in the scene. That's why we've got the emission in there. And that's going to go up here. And we're also going to want to add a transparency shader. So hit Shift A again and look for the transparent. Oop. That's going to go in here. And there we go. So I actually like to adjust the brightness from here depending on the situation. Then it's just a matter of bringing the driver into the scene where you need them, scaling them to fit, and parenting them to the car. The reason that I punch in halfway through the animation is just to hide the fact that I'm switching from the front and side views of the driver. Unless you're going to be looping them, you also want to make sure that you have enough of those green screened frames to cover your animation. So I hope you guys found this one useful, and until next time, keep a blending.